Hello and welcome to 7 Minutes of Science with me, your host, Eddie Edwards. This is your weekly rundown of the 7 biggest science stories of the week, done in 7 minutes or less, and that's a money back guarantee. Seeing as you didn't actually pay anything, instead of giving you money back, I'll do something horrible if I fail. There's a week that's been some odd news for tornadoes, as well as a couple of interesting pictures from space, and of course more news on last week's Virgin SpaceShipTwo tragedy. So without further ado, let's get my 7 minutes on the clock, and let's start in 3, 2, 1. Go. Right, Monday, good news, bad news for anybody living in the part of America known as Tornado Alley. The good news, well, as good news as you can get if you live in the part of America named Tornado Alley, is that there has been a steady decline over the last 40 years or so in the number of days on which tornadoes occur, or at least tornadoes with wind speeds of over 138 miles per hour. The bad news is that the average number of tornadoes hasn't dropped down. That's because there's been a massive surge in the amount of multi-tornado days. Back in the long ago, by which I mean any time prior to the existence of YouTube, but specifically in this case 1973, there were 187 days with at least one tornado and 2 days with 30 or more. Whereas in 2011 there were 110 days with at least one tornado and 9 days with 30 or more tornadoes. That means you've got a 2.466% chance of having your birthday be a 30 plus tornado day. This research has been conducted by Harold E. Brooks and Gregory W. Carbin and Patrick T. Marsh, and offered no statistics as to the likelihood of a sharknado, which just makes me wonder how long society at large is going to ignore the very real threat. On a slightly more sensible note, if a shift like this doesn't turn out to be linked to climate change, then I think a large part of America needs to work out what they did to anger for. Okay, and then on to Tuesday. Those of you who watched last week's show will be aware of the recent tragedy involving Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2, which broke up in flight, killing co-pilot Michael Aylesbury and left pilots Peter Seabold badly injured. There is now some information coming out from the investigation with a timeline of the flight being released. At 10:07:19, the US Pacific time, the vessel detached from its carrier plane White Knight 2 at a height of 50,000 feet. 3 seconds later, the ship's rocket ignited. A further 8 seconds, and it was travelling at just below the speed of sound. In the next 2 seconds, the vehicle reached Mach 1.02. At this point, Aylesbury is seen on recovered cockpit video engaging the ship's feathering system. This stabilises the craft, but crucially should not be engaged until they reach the re-entry stage of the flight, where they'll be travelling about Mach 1.4. The team at this point is probably going to focus attention on whether Aylesbury and Seabold were getting correct information from the onboard displays. Virgin Galactic has released a statement saying they'll fully cooperate with any investigation, but they stay committed to making space accessible to all. Wednesday, I've talked a few times on the show about my belief that we are, as humanity, is lurching towards an incredibly bizarre and science fiction future. And today I have my proof. There's been talk a long time of the concept of having the ability to plug a human brain straight into a computer. This has been going on ever since The Matrix invented the idea back in the 90s. However, I had not heard of nor even considered the concept of hooking my brain up to another human being. Well, before I even knew it was a thing, it's been done. The image you see on my left is two people in different rooms, buildings hooked up to each other's brains via the internet. The guy on the right is using his brain to move the guy on the left's hand, which then fires a cannon in a game. And sweet Zeus, that is terrifying. This is the work of mad scientists Rajesh Rao, Andrea Stucco and their team. A team I'm assuming is made up entirely of Igors and Agent Smiths. In all seriousness, this could be used to copy memories and learning straight from a teacher to a student. And I'm guessing it could have a host of applications if you're fine with having your mind invaded, which I am not. Thursday, cool stuff you've never seen before news. This image is an image of planets forming. At the middle of it, you've got HL Tau, which is a sun-like star that is less than 1 million years old, located about 450 million light years away. So I guess it's actually at least 450 million years old by now, but I'm getting distracted by how massive space is. That's never a good journey to start on. Anyway, this picture has been taken by the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, which instead of using light, scans for larger wavelengths by using radio telescopes positioned up to 15 kilometers apart, which recently had a major overhaul which upgraded its resolution, allowing images like this to be taken. The image clearly shows the disk of matter left from the sun's formation, but each of those bands you see around it has the potential to go on and form a new planet as the gravity of the individual pieces draw them together. Now, it's not often you get to see a planet being born. You get to see planets blow up a surprising amount, now I come to think about it. Anyway, I hope we keep an eye on this, because I think it'd be very interesting to see how that develops and to watch that play out. Friday, scientists, specifically Olaf Blank and his team, have managed to create a ghost under lab conditions. Or more accurately, they've managed to manufacture the feeling that a ghostly presence is in the room in a lab. And seeing as ghosts don't exist, that's essentially the same thing. In a paper entitled, amazingly, Neurological and Robot-Controlled Induction of an Apparition, they started by taking 12 people with neurological conditions that led to them sensing ghostly presence. They conducted a brain scan on them, and they found out that mostly those presences seemed to match the body language of the person experiencing them, and that the parts of the brain that were damaged in these people were the parts that dealt with self-awareness, movement, and sensing the body's position in space. So they put up a robotic arm to mimic the hand and movement of a user. And then they put it behind the user, so essentially you can write on your own back. Now, if you do that, there's absolutely no problem. But it turns out if you introduce a delay, everybody reports suddenly there's a ghostly presence in the room. So there it is. Ghosts are just the product of our own neurological problems. But a movie in which Bill Murray helped people overcome neurological differences, problems and issues, called Ghostbusters, wouldn't have been as good as the movie we got. And finally, France is set to build the biggest solar power station in Europe. This is interesting news for a few reasons. Firstly, is that France has some of the lowest renewable energy generation in Europe. This is obviously a huge step in the right direction. Obviously, we still need countries such as the UK to do something about this. Another reason why this is an important piece of news is the power plant is going to generate enough energy to power the city of Bordeaux for the next 20 years and works out cheaper than nuclear energy. Now, there's been a lot of debate over nuclear energy. It's mainly a marketing problem. It is actually an incredibly safe form of energy. But if we can sideskip that entire debate just through the simple fact that it turns out solar is cheaper, that's going to help us get where we need to be in the limited time that we do have remaining. And finally, I just want to share with you this image of Saturn's moon Titan. What you can see here is a composite shot by the Cassini probe, which is constantly finding cool stuff all over Enceladus and Titan and the rest of Saturn's moons. This particular picture has been made using real colour information, as the atmosphere is far too fake to see through. It shows a sea of liquid methane close to the moon's pole. Much like Earth has a water cycle, Titan has a methane cycle. It means that the temperature there is such that methane can exist as both a gas or a liquid. Now, the reason this particular picture has been in the news is you can see sort of a high water mark around the sea. That seems to indicate that at one point this was a much larger body of liquid. And it has shrunk over time. That's interesting. That's new information. That raises some further questions. But the main reason I wanted to show you is this is basically it's a picture taken from space of a sea of methane on the surface of one of the moons of Saturn. And it's not often you get to say that sentence. Anyway, done in under the time. Pretty close, but still okay. I'm confident. I'm happy. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the show, like the show. If you think somebody you know would like the show, share the show. And if you want to see more of what we're doing, please subscribe to the show. We're not just doing 7 minutes of science. We've got a 5-second fact that we'll be uploading daily. As well as that, I've just relaunched a comedy video called The Commentary, which is me doing sports commentary on police videos. And we've got a few other bits and pieces that should be coming up over the next week based on scheduling and overcoming a few little technical and connection problems that we've been having here. So if you do want to see any of that, please do subscribe. And until next time, good luck in your endeavours. If your endeavours be good. Goodbye.